Micah 3. I can talk about Micah this time. Nobody can stop me. Micah 3. Micah divides itself into 4 sections. It's clearly edited in 4 parts. We'll look at the individual parts after we've looked at the whole book. Right now we're still in the first section of doom. It's all warning of impending doom in this opening section. Let's review. Name. What is the name of the prophet? Close, which is a shortened or apocryphated form of who is like Yahweh, Micaiah. Michael is who is like God. That's the parallel name. Micah. Background. Perhaps, or at least, he knows the shepherd industry. Why? Where is he from? Yes, Judah. Yes, where? Where's Morsheth? Yeah, it's Morsheth Gath. What does it mean when you have a village name hyphenated with a well-known city? Yes, it's a suburb of a city. Why were all villages assigned to particular cities? For administrative and tax reasons, of course, and also in times of war for a very obvious reason. The kingdom of Judah had 46 fortified cities by the time the Assyrians invaded, which means it was a very wealthy kingdom by then. It had 46 fortified cities. What were those fortified cities used for? If you lived in Morsheth and the Assyrians invaded as they did, if they invaded the lowland region as they did, what would you do? You couldn't stay there. What would you do? You'd go to Gath and get behind those giant walls and that big moat and those ramparts and those gate towers with their triple walls on either side. By the way, did it work? Did it work? What happened to Gath in 701? And again in 689? Did it work? Populace was overrun by the great Assyrian army. On the Shephelah. The Shephelah is the foothills. Now, as you're there in the foothills around Gath, you can look down and see the Mediterranean glistening in the west. And you can look east and you can see the mountain range to the east. And up at the top of the mountain range, you can see Jerusalem. Okay? You're about midway, and you're on the road, if you're in Morsheth, between Jerusalem and Egypt. 17 miles east lies the little southern desert village of Tekoa, where Amos came from. So it's not surprising that in Micah we find quotations and expansions of passages from the book of Amos. By the time of Micah, Amos's work had probably been reduced to writing and become a book. Amos had already become one of the classical prophets. The greatest thing about Amos, of course, was he had taken the old war oracle against the foreign nations and turned it around. You remember this? How had Amos used the war oracle? Amos had applied the war oracle for the first time to whom? For the first time. We spent some time describing Amos as the first writing prophet. For the first time, Amos had taken the old war oracle and applied it to whom? To who, God's people? Well, not to Judah. No, that's what's striking. Not to Judah. To Israel. Yet he finally got to Israel. He made Israel number 7. Do you remember what other nations he mentioned? He mentioned Philistia and Tyre and Ammon and Moab and Edom in Lebanon. What distinguished all of these countries? They weren't just Israel's neighbors. They knew the covenant. How did they know the covenant? Some of them, like Moab and Ammon, were descended, yes, but that's not the key. You're on the right track, but that's not the key. But this is very good. There's a lot of general scriptural knowledge here. They had all been parts of the Davidic and Solomonic empires. They had once been part of the covenant nation and had rejected it. And Amos said that just as these nations had returned to their paganism, so Israel, the northern kingdom, had turned to a kind of social paganism that was going to result in its destruction. Now, Amos's message was directed against Israel, the northern kingdom. The reason Amos was remembered is because Amos had made such an unusual and dramatic prophecy. The prophets prior to Amos in the 9th century had prophesied all sorts of things, but they had not prophesied the destruction of God's people. That had never been done before. You read what Elijah said to the house of Omri, you read what Elisha said, and what will you find? They predicted what? The destruction of these wicked kings and their house. Right? Which is something different from and less than predicting the destruction of the nation as a nation. Got it? But when Amos came, you read the book of Amos, when Amos came to Bethel and Samaria, he said that the kingdom itself as a kingdom is unredeemable. For despite what the covenant says, you're going to be destroyed. Now this was all bound up with a concept of covenant theology. You see, we've been talking about this Sabbath afternoon. The folks assumed that the covenant was what? If God said it, just like the modern dispensationalists who are all around us here, just like the Roman Catholic Church and the Baptists and the Disciples of Christ and the Church of God and all the others, if God said it, what? It's got to come to pass. That was the basic principle of their covenant theology. They were unconditionalists. Now you've heard me talk about this week after week. The center of Adventism is what? That as regards God's promises or threatenings, they're what? They're alike conditional, said Ellen White. Okay? There was a big question about whether the covenant made with the patriarchs was conditional or unconditional. And that led directly to the question in Judah, that led to the question, was the covenant made with Judah conditional or unconditional? Why did the southern kingdom think that it had a special covenant with God? Why did they think that they had a special relationship to God that the northern kingdom didn't have? What was it? Yes, because of the covenant with David. All right? Now, Genesis 12. Turn to Genesis 12. This has something to do with Adventism. This was the problem. Verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and by you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. All right? As you read it there, in its simplest statement in Genesis 12, the covenant with Abraham and his descendants is what? How is it stated here? Huh? Yes. This is how they remembered it. If it was a suzerainty treaty, this is only the preamble. If it was a suzerainty treaty, then came the conditions. But interestingly, as it's stated here, the conditions are not stated. It's stated unconditionally. Does that tell you something? If they remembered it in that form, then there was some real danger, and that has to do with what's shocking in Micah 3. Okay, now, chapter 15. Genesis 15, verse 5. You're familiar with this? And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars if you're able to number them. Then he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. All right. Now it says in verse 13, then the Lord said to Abram, know of a surety that your descendants will be sojourners in the land that is not theirs, and be slaves there. And they will be oppressed for 400 years, but I will bring judgment on the nation which they serve. And afterward they shall come out with great possessions, and so forth. And they shall come back in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not complete. And he said on that day, verse 18, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, to the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. How is it stated here? This is E. This is from the northern kingdom. How is it stated? Stated unconditionally. Okay. Now can you hear the official theology? Right? Amos mentions the prophets prophesying peace, saying that the kingdoms would be saved. Amos said, I'm not even a prophet. He's talking about the state prophets. Micah says the same thing in today's lesson. The people remembered the promises as unconditional. Now, what promise was made that had a bearing on Jerusalem and the temple that has to do with Micah 3? Micah said something shocking in today's lesson, and it was a real shock. Overgrown with trees. Where does it say that? Micah 3. You say it says that in Micah 3? Micah 3 begins, and I said, hear you heads of Jacob and rulers of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know justice? He begins by attacking the leaders of the nation. The whole chapter has to do with the leaders of the nation, and in particular, what place? Leaders of the nation are found all over the nation, but in particular, what place? Of course, there were administrative centers. Of course, in Judah, there were at least 10 and maybe 12 administrative districts. and there were provincial leaders, governors, and so forth. So there were leaders everywhere. Micah could be addressing himself to anybody, anywhere. But, let me ask this question again, where would these leaders be concentrated, obviously? In what city? Jerusalem. He had made some comment about this. Micah 1, verse 5. Micah 1:5. All this is for the transgression of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? He's speaking of the northern kingdom. This is typical in the Old Testament. Jacob is the northern kingdom. But what is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what is the sin of the house of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? Now that's very blunt. And don't think this went over well. Look, he wasn't from Jerusalem. And he's attacking the capital city of his own country. You see, these folks who lived down in Gath, because he was from the Gath district. What was Gath? Let's remind ourselves. It was a Philistine city. How had it become a Hebrew city at all? David had done what? Do you remember this? How had Gath gotten into the story in the first place? What? Goliath of Gath. Yes, Goliath was from Gath. Now, when David destroyed the champion of Gath under ancient rules, what did he become? He was only about 17 and he was a stripling teenager according to Saul, but what did he become? He became the champion of Gath. Soon we find his father-in-law trying to murder him. We find him hiding out in the southern deserts, which he can't survive on forever. So where does he go? He goes to serve Achish, king of Gath. Oh, why did he have a welcome in Gath? He had killed their champion. They should have beheaded him as soon as they saw him. No. Under the rules, what? You kill the champion, what? You're the champion. So he turns up in Gath as the champion of Gath, gathering the rabble who were fleeing from Saul. David had some tough people working for him. All the criminals and all the bad elements in the kingdom who had reason to flee from King Saul came to David. How would you like to administer that group? That's how he got good at it. He had experience keeping his warriors in line. And when he became the emperor of a great empire, he had a personal army that surrounded him and protected him personally. He had the giants from down on the coastal plain as a personal bodyguard. Remember the Gittites? Who were the Gittites? They were the army from Gath. Remember Lami? Remember Lami? You don't remember Lami. Goliath's brother with the 6 fingers and 6 toes who was 9 feet tall. There was a kind of giantism, which is a thyroid problem, down there. They think it was a lack of iodine. And the result was that the area around Gath was growing giants. And they didn't have any basketball in those days. Such a shame. They had something like it in the Greek world, but this is 5 centuries too soon. And so what were the sports of those days? The sports of those days were sports that imitated and prepared for war. Javelin throwing, for instance, right? We throw the javelin now for the fun of it. In those days, the target was somebody tied to a post out there. Yes. We're talking about the Canaanites here. You got to remember, this is not an easy age. All right? All this is for free. Now, you remember in Proverbs, it gives counsel after counsel about not making the king mad. Yeah. Of course, that's exactly what David had done. He'd made the king mad. The later writers said the king was mad already and David just happened to be there. Okay. Now, David went and conquered Jerusalem and made it his own city. When I say that, you got to catch what it means. It means he owned it personally. It didn't belong to the tribes. It wasn't a part of Judah, and it wasn't a part of Benjamin. He and his own personal, paid-for army had gone and conquered it. Consequently, it was known as what? The City of David, which we take in kind of a religious sense today. But originally it wasn't in a religious sense. It meant he owned it. And then comes the Nathan prophecy. What did David decide to do? Build a temple. What did building a temple indicate? A hereditary monarchy in what style? In the Canaanite style. Who founded a temple and became king forever? Baal. Thank you. Right? When Baal went off to fight the 7-headed dragon, remember? And when he lost and then was resurrected on the 3rd day, they smote the dragon with a deadly wound. And he came back and came to the heavenly court in the tabernacle of El. And he said, and the messengers of Baal said, "Lift up your heads, O ye gods, and be lift up, ye ancient beings, that the King of glory may come in." And they asked, "Who is this King of glory?" And the answer was, "Baal, strong and mighty." What did he demand when he got there? He wanted to be what? Now that he'd won and beaten Prince Yam and King River, now that he had beaten the sea and the river, what did he want? He wanted to become king over the gods forever and demanded that they do what? That they build him a temple or palace to be worshipped in forever. Now this is what David demanded, and what was the answer? 2 Samuel 7. No. Well, it's no all the way to verse 11. And then what is it? Yeah. But as soon as you say your son, what have you granted? Huh? Hereditary monarchy. Yeah. And how long was this monarchy and temple to stand? 2 Samuel 7. Forever, she said. Well, let's just start with the middle of verse 11, where the pertinent parts. We've read the top part of 2 Samuel 7 often enough recently. Moreover, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house. 2 Samuel 7, verse 11. The moreover, in the middle of the verse, indicates the beginning of a new prophecy. It really should be the beginning of a paragraph, but it's not, but it should be. Verse 11, in the middle of the verse, moreover, the Lord declares to you that he will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name. Actually, the original version in Chronicles says, he shall build a house for me, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. When he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men, but I will not take my steadfast love from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words, in accordance with all this vision, Nathan spoke to David. Now, when the temple was dedicated, 1 Kings 8, how did Solomon view the future of this temple? Stand how long? Yes. Have you ever read the prayer of dedication in 1 Kings 8? The dedication prayer of the temple? Again and again in the dedication prayer of the temple, what does Solomon say about the temple itself? How long is it going to stand? Forever. Of course, the temple then is the house that is the outward symbol of the house of David. House, house. He'll build a house for my name. I will build your house. Two houses. One house is what? One house is what? Two houses, 2 Samuel 7. One house is what? Just summarize it. One is the house of David. It's the lineage. It's the dynasty. It's the dynasty that will last forever. And the other house is what? He will build a house for my name. The other house is the temple. And the two houses will stand how long? Psalm 89. Forever. The covenant, as stated, is what? Unconditional, absolute. Indeed, in Psalm 89, how long is the house of David going to last? Psalm 89. You should be able to... Yes, like the moon, like the sun, as long as the skies endure. It's part of the cosmos. It's built into the order of creation. There's always going to be a temple, and there's always going to be a house of David. All right? That was the... Does it really say that? Does it actually say like the moon? Psalm 89. Yeah, it's verses 19 through 37. I think they bear reading one more time, because then Micah 3 comes alive. Of old thou didst speak in a vision to thy faithful one, verse 19, and say, I have set the crown on one who is mighty. I have exalted one chosen from the people. I have found David my servant. With my holy oil I have anointed him, so that my hand shall ever abide with him. My arm also shall strengthen him. The enemy shall not outwit him, and the wicked shall not humble him. I will crush his foes before him, and strike down those who hate him. My faithfulness and my steadfast love shall be with him, and in my name shall his horn be exalted. I will set his hand on the sea, and his right hand on the rivers. Folks, it's a quotation right out of the Baal myth. Who did Baal beat to win the kingship? He beat Prince Yam. Yam is, in the Semitic languages, the word for sea. He conquered King Nahar. Nahar is the word for river. It's a quotation right out of the myth from Baal. How Baal, I will set his right hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers. He shall cry to me, Thou art my father. What did the Nathan oracle say that we just read? I will be his father, he will be my son. In the Old Testament, beginning in the 10th century, when you referred to the Son of God, who were you referring to? Psalm 2. All right, now look, Roy. Isaiah 9. For unto us a son is born. Who's being referred to? Well, no, don't jump ahead and read the Bible backwards. State it forward. You're in the time of Micah and Isaiah. A king. What king? A king in the house of David. The Son of God and the Son of David were parallel phrases. Okay? It was a king in the line of David. Now, you can go on to see how the New Testament developed that idea, but now you see where the idea came from. They didn't start cold. Yes?
I noticed in 9 several statements where it says, when God says, I will crush his etc. When covenant relationship failed and Israel was exiled, did they blame God because he had not been faithful to his promises?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was one of the main questions. Why hadn't God kept his promises?
Didn't blame himself?
No. You got to understand, if the covenant is unconditional, do I have to do anything to get this? It's what? It's guaranteed. That's called a covenant of grace. And the antinomians among God's people. You know what antinomians are? It's just a Greek word that means against God's law. The antinomians said, it's all grace, folks. We don't have to do anything. God has promised, and he said absolutely this is the way it's going to be. And folks, if you have faith, then what? You don't need to do it. There were Lutherans, and you've got to remember that Luther was an overreaction to Catholicism. There were Lutherans among God's Old Testament people who got the idea that the covenant was purely grace. You didn't have to do a thing at all, and God was there to guarantee his own promises, and after all, that's what the text said. Let's read on. Where were we? Oh, verse 25. I will set his hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers. He shall cry to me, thou art my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation, and I will make him the firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever, and my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his line forever, and his throne as the days of the heavens. If his children forsake my law and do not walk according to my ordinances, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with scourges. But I will not remove from him my steadfast love or be false to my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant or alter the word that went forth from my lips. Once for all, I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David. His line shall endure forever. His throne as long as the sun before me. Like the moon it shall be established forever. It shall stand firm while the skies endure. Can it be any plainer than that? Okay. Yes, you could have exile that did not destroy the monarchy. And in fact, such an exile occurred in the time of Manasseh. He was taken away to Assyria for 2 years, promised to be good, and was reinstated. The people didn't see that as the end of the monarchy. They saw that as proof that the monarchy would never fall. Even the Assyrians, who had destroyed kingdom after kingdom after kingdom, and who had destroyed king after king after king, did not destroy David's line. Right? That's exactly what happened. Now, what is it then that is shocking in Micah 3. Solomon says in the dedication that the house will stand forever. The house is the outward symbol of the monarchy that will stand forever. It's stated in the clearest, most unconditional terms, and yet what does Micah say in today's lesson? Does it really say that? 3:12, are you sure? Nobody could be that crazy, could they? Look, this whole chapter that we're studying this week begins, he had already said that the sin of Judah is Jerusalem. Chapter 1, 5.
What is the sin of the house of Judah? I thought that the RSV footnote says that the Hebrew actually says one of the high places of Jerusalem.
The Hebrew is incorrect. It's a scribal error. Notice that the Greek, all the Aramaic Targums, and the Syriac agree that the original word in the text was the sin of. The Masoretic text is corrupt here. Good question. Actually, a text-critical question in Sabbath school. Boy, we're doing good here. Yes, look. Verse 9, 3:9. In the light of this theology, which is very clear in the Bible, that the temple will stand forever and that the monarchy will stand forever, we have this from Micah 3:9. Micah from Gath, that Philistine city. Hear this, you heads of the house of Jacob and rulers of the house of Israel, who abhor justice and pervert all equity, who build Zion with blood and Jerusalem with wrong. Its heads give a judgment for bribe. Its priests teach for hire. Its prophets divine for money. Yet they lean on the Lord and say, is not the Lord in the midst of us? No evil can come upon us. Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field. Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the mountain of the house a wooded height. Now, how do you think the folks reacted to this oracle here?
Same way the priest reacted when Christ said, I don't care this temple.
Yes. Why wasn't Micah dead? This is a good news, bad news story. Why wasn't Micah dead? Well, to get angry enough to kill somebody, you have to do what? Yeah, you have to take it seriously. And what? They didn't take it seriously. If they'd taken it seriously, as they did some prophets, what would have happened? He lived to old age, and he died a natural death. How do I know? Jewish tradition records the martyrdom of various prophets. Those sorts of things were remembered. But Micah what? First of all, he prophesied through the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah. Those kings began about 650 BC, 750 BC, and ended in around 687 BC. That's 3 long reigns. Now, I don't think he began at the very beginning of Jotham and ended in the last day of Hezekiah. unless he lived as long as Moses. But the point is, for his day and time, Micah lived a long time and died a natural death. I'll tell you who they did take seriously later on. Did Micah do in the state theology? Did it end with Micah? Did they start to think of the covenant with David as conditional? Did they start to think of the covenant with the patriarchs as conditional? No, not at all. What did the people of Judah continue to believe? That what? After the northern kingdom was destroyed, and they became a vassal state, wouldn't you mind your P's and Q's then? Especially if it was the Assyrians. See, I wouldn't want the Assyrians carving my skin off while I was still alive, or crucifying me, or burning me a piece at a time from the feet up, or any of these other things that the Assyrians like to do to folks who didn't listen to what they had to say. I'd have minded my P's and Q's, but what did the Judeans do? Again and again. What did they do? They kept rebelling against the king of Assyria. Why did they have the nerve to do that? Because they said what? God's with us, and what? He'll never let us fall to this pagan empire. The king on David's throne, the temple on Mount Zion is forever. You can find psalm after psalm that says that. Yeah. Eventually, there came a time when it became clear that it might be possible that that was going to happen. But it didn't happen in Micah's day. Right? When did it happen? In fact, it didn't even happen under the Assyrians. As fate would have it, what happened was that the Elamites and the Babylonians and a bunch of the western states got together against Assyria all at once, because Assyria was the most hated power in the world, and there was some internal turmoil, and this huge empire that was the great power of its day collapsed in about 3 years, like that. And nobody had expected it. The whole world was shocked when the Assyrian Empire, under pressure, fell apart in 3 years' time. We saw that happen in our day. Empires don't fall very often, do they? But we actually lived to see a great world empire collapse and fall apart in a couple of years. It's really shocking, isn't it, when it happens? Because it looks so powerful and mighty, right? In the days of Brezhnev, we knew that what? We had to keep spending all that money. Why? There was the Russian Empire outspending us, right? And we knew that if we stop, what will they do? They'll do us in. And then what? Gone. So, when the empire fell, what did the folks in Judah say? Look, we outlasted them. The king on David's throne and the temple on Zion will stand. In fact, what had the great Assyrian Empire tried to do? Twice. 701, again in 689, what had they done? Besieged Jerusalem and what? And failed. And the Assyrians didn't fail. And when they failed, the folks said what? You see, it's proved. Just as God said. He's very gracious. But the prophets in our Bible is the minority report on all this, folks. Our canon is the folks who said, it isn't so. Who said what? No? Hezekiah's reform staved off the destruction. But who was the successor to Assyria? Who filled the power vacuum? Very quickly. The Neo-Babylonian Empire. Now, in Jeremiah 26, in Jeremiah 26, this is what Jeremiah said. Verse 1. In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, the word came from Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh, stand in the court of Yahweh's house, and speak to all the cities of Judah which come to worship in the house of Yahweh. And all the words that I command you, you shall speak to them. Do not hold back a word. It may be that they will listen, and every one turn from his evil way, that I may repent of the evil which I intend to do to them because of their evil doings. There's conditionalism. You shall say to them, thus says Yahweh, if you will not listen to me, to walk in my law which I've set before you, and to heed the words of my servants the prophets, whom I send you urgently, though you have not heeded, then I will make this house like Shiloh, and I will make this city a curse for all the nations of the earth. What was the promise to Abraham? I will make you a blessing to all the nations of the earth. And here, he's deliberately punning on the covenant with Abraham. He's saying what? I will make you a curse to all the nations of the earth. And I'll make this house like Shiloh. That was very sensitive to them. Why? Because Jeremiah was descended from the house of Abiathar, and he was a descendant of Eli the priest. He was from the priestly line of Moses. And what had happened to the Mosaic house? What had happened at Shiloh? Been destroyed by the Philistines after warnings, right? So Jeremiah was referring to an event in his own family history that was also a national event. The tabernacle at Shiloh was destroyed by the Philistines. If you want to know what happened to the tabernacle that Moses built in the wilderness, the answer is that it was burned by the Philistines and David had to replace it. Okay? Now, the people wanted to put him to death. In verse 16, the princes and all the people said to the priests and the prophets, this man does not deserve the sentence of death, for he has spoken in the name of Yahweh our God. And certain of the elders of the land arose and spoke to the assembled people, saying, Micah of Moresheth prophesied in the days of Hezekiah king of Judah, and said to all the people of Judah, thus says Yahweh of hosts, Zion shall be plowed as a field, Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the mountain of the house a wooded height. Did Hezekiah king of Judah and all Judah put him to death? Did he not fear the Lord and entreat the favor of the Lord? And did not the Lord repent of the evil which he had pronounced against them? The passage I've just read shows you what happened as a result of Micah 3. Now, tell me about today's lesson. Micah 3. What happened? Ahaz died. Hezekiah came to the throne. He listened to this prophecy, and what did he do? He led the nation in a national reform. And the great reform of Hezekiah's day is said by the elders of Judah in Jeremiah's day a century later, in a statement to try to save Jeremiah's life, that when Micah said this a century ago, Hezekiah king of Judah repented and listened to what Micah said. This is one of those times where we can point to a passage and say what? While it didn't work at the time it was pronounced in Ahaz's day, nevertheless what? A few years later, when Ahaz's son Hezekiah came to the throne, what happened? The people took this prophecy of Micah's seriously. Micah was still alive, according to the superscription of the book. He was still there, and they listened to what he said, and he was one of the instigators of Hezekiah's reform. There are many times in the Old Testament we don't know what happened. We don't know the result of a particular passage. But this is one of the most dramatic places in Scripture where you can point to it, you can say the person said something shocking, and it worked. So Micah was a conditionalist. Yes? And we can draw a spiritual lesson. You have to be careful around centers of God's people. Micah, like many of the prophets, was anti-congregational. He didn't want the people to crowd together in cities. There's an anti-city ethic in the Old Testament. He didn't want the people to crowd together in cities, and he didn't want God's people crowding together, because the prophet said, when you get a lot of God's people together, the general tendency is what? Is downward. This is a prophetic view. We have to be very careful to keep this in mind and think about it around an Adventist institution. Thank you very much.